All right, everybody, welcome to the Phil Ferguson Show. Today I have with me the one and only Mickey Dollens, not to be confused, sadly, even on your fucking Wikipedia page, it says not to be confused with Mickey Dollens from the Monkees, but you're the genuine Mickey Dollens from Oklahoma, right?
Yeah, that's correct. My dad thought he was pretty funny naming me after a pop star from the 60s. But hey, it's worked out while campaigning, so I can't complain.
Yeah. And sometimes name recognition can make all the difference. But my quick review of your House of Representatives page and your Wikipedia page, you didn't win by a few votes. You crushed it, dude. How did that? Oh, before we even get into that, let's go back even further because I was reading and you were what do they call it? You worked on an oil rig. What was the name for that?
I was a roughneck, but if you ask my colleagues on the rig, I was a worm hand.
A worm hand.
Yeah, it's about this low as you can get on the totem pole when you're
Oh, roughneck.
breaking out in the oil fields.
Roughneck sounds better. And then I saw one of them. It said you had your oil rig. It says you were forced to lay over his rig. What does that mean? Did you like sacrifice on a grenade or something? What the hell is that?
Well, the cyclical nature of oil and gas,
Yeah.
especially in a state like Oklahoma, you're going to have cycles of boom and bust. And when I first started off, we were in the decline toward a bust. And after a year and a half of roughnecking in the Oklahoma oil fields, we got to a point where the price per barrel got so low that it wasn't profitable to drill any longer. So, in that case, the owner of the independent exploration company decided to lay the rigs over, and in which case we spent a couple weeks washing them with diesel, cleaning them up, and then the inevitable happened. We were laid off.
It's a fascinating thing for me to process in my brain that the way you clean something is with diesel.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And of course, out in the oil fields, the diesel is dark red. And so they do that as a way so people can't steal it. It's a little bit different than the type of diesel you get at the gas station. And so those rigs are completely operated and ran off of diesel gas. And yeah, and who knew that it also served as a great cleaning agent as well?
Now, I don't know. Have we talked about electric cars? Do you have thoughts on electric cars? I'm going to go randomly go to that now that popped in my head.
Phil, it just occurred to me that maybe washing a drilling rig with diesel, buckets of it, may have not been the safest thing now that I
Yeah.
think of it. Of course, that was about 10 years ago.
And of course, they collected every drop and protected the environment from it.
Yeah, I mean that plus there's like fires and stuff on the rig as well. So anyway, electric vehicles show a lot of promise. Unfortunately, in Oklahoma, there's a company called Canoe that
Yeah.
the state legislature appropriated through primarily our governor hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not in the millions. I'm about to do a TV interview on this later, and they have failed to produce one single commercial EV unit. And so their stock price went from $9 to currently 35 cents.
Ah,
And unfortunately, the way in which they're treating their employees is ethically wrong. They laid them off without any health insurance, without any severance, without any notice. And thankfully, the local news has been talking about it. And the ownership of Canoe, once they saw this, said, okay, we'll give you 1 month of health insurance. But still, it's not right. And unfortunately, so many taxpayer dollars went to subsidize that particular company, and we got no return on investment. And
yeah,
so,
that does sound like a buzzkill. The other company that I see from time to time, I don't think it has anything to do with your state, is called Aptera. And they've been working on a three-wheeled car that has solar panels on it, and it's shaped like a teardrop. So it's wickedly efficient. And people keep sending me links like, Phil, you can invest in this, and here's blah, blah, blah. And they don't know that they've been working on this car since 2005.
yeah, and
So I think they've had
that's a
three,
risky.
yeah,
That,
they've
that,
had three bankruptcies already.
Yeah, that's a risk. But, my comments on that particular company, Canoe, are not reflective of the entire EV industry. Obviously, you've got the big players like Ford and Nissan,
Oh,
Hyundai,
you are the politician, aren't you?
GMC. I think the new GMC Hummer EV looks pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, until I saw the price tag of about $100,000. And I thought, my GMC Canyon 2018 that's all paid off
Yeah.
is looking pretty good.
Well, I just recently have an acquaintance who is very anti EV, just happened to stumble across while looking for an Equinox, just on a whim, was like, hey, I heard there's an electric one. Can I try that just to see what it's like inside? And he drove it for 5 minutes and he's like, Phil, I'm so sorry. You've been right all these years. It's so much better in every way. And I bought one.
Wow. Apparently
Uh,
they have a lot of get up and they're
it,
quiet. Yeah,
yeah,
that particular one.
there's huge perks to it. Of course, I don't want to bury you in all of that. I'm just going to go back in time again. You were working with the NFL.
Well, I was a college football player at a D1 school in Dallas, Texas called Southern Methodist University.
Okay.
Currently ranked number 13 in the country right now, so they've been having a good season.
13 in a division or 13 total?
Overall, yeah, out of all the college Division 1 college football teams, they're ranked.
Wow.
So,
Because Division D sounds like it's small.
oh, D1, Division D1. Yeah.
I'm not a sports
Well, no,
ball
it's
person.
yeah, it's the largest division, and they're in the ACC conference, so they've really stepped it up, and they have a chance of winning their conference, being the first time they've played in it this year. But
Nice.
but all that to say, I did play college football, tried out for the NFL,
Yeah.
did not make a team, did not get drafted, did not get hired by a team, but it opened up some windows of opportunity. Primarily, the United States bobsledding team
Yeah.
offered me an invite to Lake Placid, New York to try out for the four-man Olympic bobsled team. And so I soon found myself sitting in the second position in a four-man bobsled going 100 miles per hour down a track in Lake Placid, New York, which my dad joke at that time in my life was it was going downhill fast.
Well, at least you were there, hopefully, when it was cold, because you have to have snow on the track. That part of New York in the peak of summer is known for a thing called black flies. I don't know if you ever experienced them in the summer there.
No, I haven't. Like dry, like basically like oh yeah, I think we have those. They bite you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they do. It's not like a horsefly bite because a horsefly bite will get you screaming. But this is way more than a mosquito bite. It'll get your attention, and you don't want to have any more. So you run. You run fast. You get in your car. But yeah, we experienced that in upstate New York. Good fun. And then, of course, after the oil rigging, you became a teacher. You did that for a couple of years, right?
Yeah, I want a quick fun fact about those
Yeah,
bobsled tracks. They're actually refrigerated. So every bobsled track in the world, except for the very first one in St. Moritz, Switzerland, has refrigeration. So around October is when they turn the refrigeration on, and it creates about a 3-inch layer of ice in which you can go down it. But otherwise, they have these passenger rides where the bobsled is on tires,
yeah,
and a professional can take tourists down it, and they start off about halfway down the track. But yeah, at this time right now, it's not probably freezing up in Lake Placid, but definitely the track is turned on, and there's they have the ability to practice right now.
very, very nice.
I did have the opportunity to do that track in St. Moritz, Switzerland, and it was awesome being carved out of a single piece of ice. It was unique in that it wasn't loud going down because
Yeah,
those metal tracks with the refrigeration sound kind of like one of those old school roller coasters
yeah.
that are really loud and rough when you're going down. But yeah, that one in St. Moritz was awesome, very smooth. It was quiet. It was also the longest one in the world, about a mile and a half long, as opposed to about a mile. And so that was really awesome.
And how long does that mile and a half trip take you?
Oh, about a minute and a half. Yeah, you're flying. Of course, that's why the push is so important at the top.
Yeah,
Every 100th of a second is going to equate to a tenth of a second at the bottom, and that can be the difference between first and fifth place. A few tenths of a second.
yeah.
And so we would get up there and push, and then by the time you're halfway down the track, you're reaching speeds of upwards to 80 miles per hour, sometimes 90, 95 miles per hour.
Did you get in a flip in any of them? Leave the track?
Yeah. Yeah, my third time down the track, I decided to open my eyes for the first time. And
Okay.
because it wasn't an actual race, I poked my head up a little bit and I looked, and it looked like I was going through a time warp. And right after that, we flipped and landed on our heads. And that sport, you don't just stop, you keep going
Yeah.
and you keep sliding. And you hope that there's a track worker at the bottom to catch you before you start going back the other way, because that's one way you slow down is at the end you go up a hill.
Yeah.
And if no one's there to catch you, then you find yourself going back down the way you came. So
It's like those truck ramps on mountains.
yeah, that's right. Runaway.
Yeah, yeah. So you ended up being a teacher
Hmm.
and you taught, what did you teach? English history?
Yeah, so right after the oil fields, we laid those rigs over. We were laid off, and I was the only person on the rig with a college degree, and so I immediately put my English degree to use and was hired at a school in Oklahoma City Public Schools called U.S. Grant. And first year I was teaching leadership in a college preparatory class, and then my second year they found room for me in a portable because this school is very overpopulated, but they found room for me to teach freshman English, and I loved it. I used some of my oil money to put a down payment on a house. This is back in 2015 when
Yeah.
it was more practical and easier to find a single family dwelling before the institutional landlords bought them all up. And so I loved it. I thought, hey, I'm going to be teaching. I love to coach, love to teach, and then due to that revenue loss in oil and gas,
Right.
Oklahoma had failed to diversify its economic portfolio, and then the trickle down of that happened. So pretty soon, schools had to go to 4-day school weeks. We were in a $1.5 billion revenue failure
Wow.
because so many of the Republicans in Oklahoma had signed a Grover Norquist pledge when they ran for office, and that pledge is a promise to never raise a penny in taxes.
Yeah.
So over years and years of cutting taxes and never raising revenue, it got to the point that combined with the falling oil prices, got to the point where they could not afford to pay the bills. And I say they, the Republican leadership who the state has elected to govern. And as a result, over 800 teachers across Oklahoma were laid off due to lack of funding. And me being in my second year of teaching, unfortunately, I was caught up in that mess, and
And
that was a big reason why I ran for office.
yeah, yeah. So they're not going to increase any taxes, and they shrink government and stop giving away free money to the people that aren't producing anything, like children
Yeah,
and teachers who are obviously worthless in the minds of the state representatives. And so you said enough is enough, and you were going to run.
exactly. And you make a great point there. The party of pro-life won't accept
Yeah,
federal dollars to feed kids during summertime.
yeah,
And that's just one of 100 examples to call out hypocrisy of the party of pro-life not actually valuing, in many respects, in many ways, that life once they're born. And so, yeah, I decided that I would run for office. I looked up my state representative. Now, keep in mind, for those listening, I had no connections politically, didn't have a war chest of money, was just some person out there like hundreds of other teachers who were wanting to make a change. And in that particular year, quite a few teachers ran for office. And myself, and I was lucky to be elected. And the way you mentioned at the top of the hour, I won by 60%, which in political terms is a landslide. But
yeah.
I flipped a Republican district to Democrat, and I did that just by knocking doors, going to my neighbors and asking them what was important to them. And at the time, it was public education, mental health, infrastructure.
Yeah. I think I lost you, so I'm gonna pause for a moment and just wait for you to come back. All right, everybody, we just had a little technical difficulties. PC reboot for Mickey, and it's all good. Neither one of us is 100% sure what sentence he was in the middle of, so it's going to seem like a little awkward jump here. But you were telling us about being a teacher, losing your job, and getting into the government. Oh, I think you were talking about going all this door to door, and you won by, as you said, a landslide. So get us up to speed on that.
That's right. For anyone who's wanting to run for office. Take it from me, I don't come from anyone who's politically connected or didn't have a war chest to campaign funds. It was simply grassroots, getting out there, talking to voters in my neighborhood and asking them what was important to them. And if they asked me why I was running, I would tell them I was running for mental health for people like my brother, for jobs like my friends on the drilling rig, and for education like my former students and teachers, colleagues that were impacted by failed fiscal policies from the
Right.
Oklahoma GOP. And thankfully for me, that message resonated. And I was elected in 2016 and have been in office ever since and have had the opportunity to serve as the minority whip for the Oklahoma House Democratic Caucus.
Now, minority whip, is that top of the organization? Is that second position? That sounds pretty high ranking.
Well, it's in leadership, and so it would typically go like minority leader, floor leader, and then you probably about third or fourth down would be the minority whip. And it's a great position. I get
Yeah.
to inform my colleagues on bills that they may have questions on. Also, if there's ever a time where it would make sense for us to unify as a caucus and withhold or come together to leverage our votes to maybe get more of our bills heard. There's a whole strategy in all of that,
Of
and
course.
that's why I really enjoy that position in leadership, and I'm thankful for Minority Leader Munson here in Oklahoma for giving me that position, and I've had it for about 6 years now.
Well, I know that we met a little bit in person, and you gave a presentation in Denver.
Mhm.
Um, what kind of fuckery are the Republicans doing in your state, and what are they going to do next?
Well, as soon as I landed in Denver to talk at the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the news broke that our state superintendent, who is continually pushing rhetoric and policies and rules that are rooted in Christian nationalism, he made a press release stating that he was going to use $6 million in taxpayer funds to purchase a very specific Bible that had to include the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, had to be leather bound. And by the way, according to the bid process, there was only one out of 2,400 Bibles that fit the criteria, and that is the Lee Greenwood Bible that is endorsed by Donald Trump and directly profits Donald Trump to assist with his legal troubles. And so, of course, Oklahomans, who typically are very Christian, were still up in arms because it's a direct overreach of our Constitution. It's anti-constitutional.
Yeah.
And thankfully, there's a lot of Oklahomans who know that the best way to protect their religious liberty and religious freedoms is by defending the separation of church and state. And so, while of course there's a handful who really support Ryan Walters and that initiative to use tax dollars to buy Bibles and force them in schools, the majority of Oklahomans were against that. And actually, talking about that on the doors and just our state superintendent in general, Ryan Walters, has been a huge boost for Democrats. I was out helping one of my friends in Norman yesterday campaign for her election today,
Yeah.
and that came up quite a bit on the doors. Can you just do something about the state superintendent? And while we have tried everything possible as a minority caucus, ultimately it falls upon GOP leadership to hold their own accountable, which unfortunately we have not seen yet.
Wow. And is that still pending? Did that get withdrawn? What's going on with the Bible purchase?
Yeah, it's still pending, and of course, there's the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Americans United, ACLU, and a bunch of normal Oklahoma citizens have filed lawsuits against it to try to stop it. So it is kind of tied up in litigation right now, but people are very curious to see how it will turn out. But we know at the end of the day, this is just simply another tactic that the state superintendent has used, like many Republicans, to distract from the failures and the lack of their work that they're actually doing when it comes to their real job. And then also in this case, it's to try to get on uh, former President Trump's good side. So in the event if he were elected, which today is Tuesday, election day, the tactic there is for the strategy is that Ryan Walters wants to be appointed to something in the federal administration.
Absolutely. And just a quick reminder to listeners and or viewers, if you're on YouTube watching this, uh, as you just said, we're doing this on election day, but we don't know the results. So anyone who's going to be watching this, the election's over, and hopefully the country's in one piece. But we don't know what's going to happen yet in the future or in your past, dear viewer, listener. What kind of stuff have you done? Bills sponsored, passed? What is on your agenda, your plate for Oklahoma?
Well, in the past, it's really been focused on housing and fighting corporate landlords and strengthening tenant rights. Unfortunately, the tenant protections in Oklahoma are very weak. And as a result, we have out-of-state corporate landlords and institutional investors who are gobbling up the housing market, knowing that they can prey and take advantage of our weak tenant protection laws. And so, unfortunately, a lot of my constituents will put in a formal request for a basic improvement, such as a broken air conditioner or a broken heater, and months will go by without any resolve. And so I wrote a law a couple years ago that was passed that says that if a tenant puts in writing to their landlord that a basic improvement must be made and it goes unresolved, then that tenant can use up to 1 month's rent to fix the issue themselves and not have to pay that on the next month's rent. I wanted to make it 2 months. Of course, in politics, there's compromise. So
Right.
decided on 1 month. And that's been very helpful for the people who know about it. Unfortunately, it's hard to get out that message. And so anytime I have a chance to talk about that on the news or on podcasts, I do. And for anyone listening, in a state where they feel like they're being taken advantage of by institutional investors and corporate landlords, it's a great bill that can be replicated in other states as well. Of course, a couple years ago, we addressed missing and murdered Indigenous people in
Mm,
Oklahoma. One of
right.
my constituents had a cousin who went missing in Indian country. Therefore, the county couldn't do anything. They told her to go through this complicated jurisdictional maze and connect with the federal law enforcement, FBI, and they weren't really getting anywhere. So what we did is we created a new position within the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, a liaison, if you will, to help families of Native Americans navigate those jurisdictional mazes when it comes to law enforcement to get answers sooner. And of course, we have this DNA database called NamUs that is national, and we bolstered that. So we've been able to make some headway recently when it comes to missing and murdered Indigenous people, particularly women and girls
Yeah.
in Oklahoma. And I'm happy to say that that particular bill has been replicated in about 4 different states since passing it as well.
I think you should pitch to Hollywood a new version of NCIS that takes place in Oklahoma on reservations or nearby reservations. That sounds like it'd be fun.
Yeah, and if listeners haven't seen the Martin Scorsese film with Leonardo DiCaprio, Killers of the Flower Moon, that takes place
Ah,
in the spot where I grew up in northeastern Oklahoma. And so from early 1900s and in the 1920s, of course, Native Americans were inheriting the oil mineral rights, and unfortunately, Caucasians were creating a system in which they would systematically kill them to inherit those mineral rights, and everyone was in on it, from the judges to the cops to the locals, and they were stealing this wealth from indigenous people. And thankfully, the FBI got involved, and Herbert Hoover was the first person to come in and bust that and make it national news, and that elevated him to the national spotlight, which eventually he won
right.
presidency. But it's a very sad time in Oklahoma history. And this is an unusual state. We're a relatively young state, being right in the middle of the country, but we've got a pretty dark past, to say the least.
Yeah, fair enough. I know that you've had some weather problems lately. What's going on with your tornado alley there?
Well, Oklahoma, I've always said being the tourist director of Oklahoma would be a pretty difficult job, because to the east of us, you have the amazing hiking in Arkansas, and then south, you've got shopping in Dallas. To the west, you've got skiing in New Mexico, Colorado. And so one of the biggest tourist attractions, one is our Native American culture, which is just incredible what the
Right.
tribes have done, not only for tourism, but for the people of Oklahoma. And the second largest tourist attraction is tornado chasing. So people come from all over the country, especially in early spring, to get a glimpse of Twisters. And of
Right.
course, the new movie just came out, Twisters, which was a big hit, filmed right here in Oklahoma. And it's been unusual because typically those will all hit in the spring and summertime, and we may have a few fall storms. But this October, November has been unlike anything I've seen. The past few days, we've had terrible destruction from numerous tornadoes just down the street from my house. Thankfully, not in my district, but my neighboring district, where my colleague Representative Andy Fugate represents, just demolished. There's been some injuries, but thankfully no lives have been lost.
And I think one of the goals of Project 2025 that the Republicans love but deny is to end the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration and the Hurricane Center and storm chasing and all these alerts because it's just wasted government money. It doesn't help anybody. I'm assuming you have an opinion on that.
Oh my, yeah, to deny the scientific facts isn't going to make the weather get any less extreme.
Yeah,
At this point, we are losing not only um, tons of property and value, but human lives as well. And so to just stick your head in the sand and to try to ignore the science and the data is only going to make things worse. That would be a terrible decision if that were to be the case, if that were to ever happen.
absolutely. I know we talked pre-show, which is not recorded, in case anyone wants to know. You have also written a couple of books. What are those about?
I've always enjoyed writing. I majored in English in college, and in 2013, I wrote my first book. It's called Recruit Yourself: How to Earn an NCAA Football Scholarship. And I wanted to explore and I wanted to teach kids how they can go about marketing themselves and earning athletic scholarships without having to rely too heavily on their parents or coaches to do that for them. And so that was written and published in 2013. A lot of it still holds true today. I should probably write a second edition,
Yeah,
but what it comes down to is putting your best foot forward. And that can be applicable to anything in life, from getting a job resume to friendships, relationships, earning football scholarships. And so that was my first book. But my most recent book just came out in August, and that's called The Citizen's Guide to Political Change: How to Win with Ballot Initiatives and Defend Direct Democracy. Oklahoma, I mentioned, is a relatively young state. We're the 46th state, and we are also the first state to have incorporated direct democracy into our original constitution. Now, there are only three forms of direct democracy. One is probably the one that most people are familiar with, and that's ballot initiatives, where ordinary citizens can go out, collect signatures, get an idea, get a question on the ballot, a yes or no. A lot of common state questions have been raising the minimum wage, medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, abortion access, those type of questions. The other two forms of direct democracy are election recalls. So, and this is common in California. It's how Arnold won the governorship in California, because there was an election recall.
yeah,
And and then it's kind of the same process. People go about gathering signatures, and then it goes to the vote of the people. And then the other one is a veto referendum. If the governor in Oklahoma signs a bill that people are dissatisfied with, they can go out and collect a certain amount of signatures. And if that threshold is met, then it can go to the vote of the people to repeal that bill if they'd like. My colleague Jason Lowe did this a few years ago when the governor signed permitless carry into law, where no one needs any background, very little background checks, no training whatsoever, and they can just open carry
right.
wherever they want, and any type of rifle uh, or handgun they want. And so that's one example of a veto referendum. And so this particular ballot initiative has been very fruitful for Oklahoma in recent years. It's a way that we finally got Medicaid expansion. Therefore, 250,000 plus people now have health insurance who
Wow.
otherwise wouldn't. And we had been waiting on the legislature to take action on Medicaid expansion for 10 years. And when we realized they weren't, a group of grassroots individuals went out and gathered the signatures and made it happen. It's also the reason why we have medical marijuana, criminal justice reform, and we just gathered 155,000 signatures to raise the minimum wage from $7.25 up to $15 by 2030. Oklahoma is one of the most impoverished states,
Yeah,
and there's so many societal ills that stem from poverty. I really believe that raising the minimum wage will help alleviate a lot of those problems.
absolutely. Did abortion make it on one of those initiatives?
You know, not in Oklahoma, but today there are 10 states across the country that are voting on reproductive freedoms, abortion access, and
Impressed.
it'll be in the hands of voters in 10 states. Now, I know we've heard a lot of Trump and Vance going around and justifying their repeal of Roe v. Wade, and they take credit for overturning that. And then they scapegoat it to say, well, now everyone in every state has the opportunity to vote on it themselves. And that's just simply not true because only 26 states have the power of the ballot initiative. And and not everyone can go out and gather signatures in half the states out there. And every state legislature could send a question directly to the people to decide, but we know that's very unlikely, especially in states like Oklahoma, where they've gone to great lengths to take away freedoms.
Right.
Um, it would be unlikely that they would give people the opportunity to vote on that, but that would be in line with what their leader of the GOP party is saying.
Well, I'm in Florida, and hopefully that and marijuana passes. Hopefully, by the time people are watching this, it will have passed. What have we not covered? Because I don't want to. I know you've got work to do. I don't want to spend all day, but what have we not covered that you want to go over?
I want to share a great story about Florida and the
Yeah.
ballot
Okay.
initiatives.
Yeah.
One of the people I interviewed for my book is named Desmond Meade, and when Desmond was young, he made some decisions. So he made some terrible decisions that ended him up in the Florida penitentiary for about 10 years. And while he was in the penitentiary, he discovered the prison library and started reading every book he could on law. And after he got out a little early on good behavior, he went and took the LSAT, was accepted into law school, passed the bar, and became um, a great attorney and a very important member to society. However, at that point, he could not vote in elections because he had a prior felony conviction. And using his knowledge and his law background, he took advantage of Florida's right to petition the government through ballot initiatives. And he organized a petition gathering event to gather signatures saying that if you've paid your debt to society, you're a former convicted felon, and you've paid your debt and you've served your time, then your right to vote should be restored. And he and a bunch of other motivated individuals went out and gathered the signatures and got it on the ballot and were able to pass it. And as a result, Desmond Meade, the guy who was serving time in the Florida penitentiary, was able to restore voting rights to over 4.5 million Floridians. And so that's a really awesome story of the power of the ballot initiatives and how grassroots organizing and someone with a plan and others who believe in the plan can make extraordinary change at the grassroots level.
Excellent. I'll leave it on a message of hope. Everybody, once again, this is Mickey Dollens, and what's your district number?
I'm in District 93 in
93.
Oklahoma City. You can find me on Twitter at Mickey Dollens, MickeyDollens. I'm also on Facebook and would love to connect with anyone and hear your thoughts on the show.
Well, thank you so much for coming and spending time on the Phil Ferguson Show. I appreciate it very much.
All right. Thank you, Phil. Y'all have a good day.